I've lived near the Olympic Peninsula for over 40 years and spent most of that time hiking the forests. I've heard stories about Bigfoot for decades, grunts in the trees, tracks in the mud, but I never expected to see one, let alone something smaller. This isn't a tale meant to change minds or stir up drama. I'm sharing it because it happened, plain and simple. What we saw wasn't imagined, and it wasn't a bear. It was real. A young Bigfoot, out in the open, in the Ferns. And it wasn't alone. Not for a second. It was just after 6 in the morning when my brother and I stepped onto the trailhead near Lake Crescent in the Olympic Peninsula. We've walked that trail dozens of times over the years. Always early, always quiet. This time felt no different at first. Just two older guys out for some fresh air and exercise before the day warmed up. The forest greeted us with its usual damp scent, moss, wet soil, cedar bark. The air was still cool, and a thin mist clung to the undergrowth like a low-hanging fog curtain. Sunlight filtered through the tall Douglas firs in soft golden shafts, catching the tips of the sword ferns that lined both sides of the trail. It was peaceful. Still. We didn't talk much, just the occasional comment about a broken branch or the unusually thick morning dew. But maybe a quarter-mile in, we both noticed something odd. Not something we saw, but something we didn't hear. No birds, no squirrels, no wind even. Just a stillness that felt heavier than it should have. You get used to the forest having a certain background rhythm. Birds chirping, branches creaking, maybe a woodpecker or two. This morning had none of that. It wasn't silence from nature resting. It was the kind of silence where things were holding their breath. That's when I first noticed movement to the left of the trail, low to the ground. It wasn't a deer. Too low and too quick. More like something crouched, moving smoothly through the ferns without snapping a single twig. I stopped, squinting toward the dense patch. My brother stopped too, asking, "Did you see that?" I nodded. We stood still for a good 30 seconds, listening. Then he pointed down to the trail edge. "Look at this," he said. There, just barely visible in the damp dirt, was a partial footprint. Not human, too wide, too flat. You couldn't make out toes, but the depression was solid, definitely made by something heavy. We pressed on slowly, not out of fear, but out of curiosity. The forest still hadn't gone back to normal, no birds, not even a buzzing fly. About 10 minutes further in we stopped again. Another rustle in the ferns, maybe 30 feet away, this time higher, like something rising up, and then we saw it. Not clearly, not yet, but there was definitely something there, and it wasn't a deer, not a bear either. Whatever it was watching us, and it wasn't alone. At first glance, I thought it was a young bear. We'd stopped again about half a mile in, standing on a slight rise that overlooked a dip in the trail, thick with ferns and low brush. That's when I saw movement again. Something small, dark, and quick darting between the ferns. I tapped my brother on the arm and pointed. He caught a glimpse too. "Bear cub," he whispered. That was our first thought. The creature was low to the ground, maybe 3 to 4 feet tall, covered in reddish-brown fur. But the way it moved didn't add up. It wasn't dropping down on all fours. It wasn't lumbering like a bear. It was walking, upright, like a person. And not just upright, smoothly upright. No staggering, no wobble, no effort like a toddler learning to balance. It moved like it had been walking on 2 legs. Its whole life. We crouched low behind a downed log, keeping silent. From our spot, we had a decent view down into the dip. That's when we got a clear look. This thing wasn't a bear. Its body was covered in thick matted fur, a deep reddish-brown, with some lighter tones under the arms, but the arms were the part that stood out. Long, almost too long for its size, and they swung freely as it moved. It had a bit of a pot belly, like a toddler. Its head looked slightly large for its frame, rounder than you'd expect, with no noticeable neck. And the eyes, dark, wide-set and alert, like it was focused on every small thing around it. It wasn't scared. It wasn't hiding. It didn't know we were there. It was just playing. We watched as it picked up a stick and tossed it into the air, then chased it like a puppy. A moment later it crouched low and tried swatting at something. A bug, maybe? And then fell backward into the ferns, arms up, legs kicking. It rolled over and jumped to its feet in one motion, again with that same upright, effortless movement. It wasn't making any sound. Just the quiet rustle of ferns and the occasional thump of a stick hitting the ground. The whole scene didn't last more than 5 minutes, but I remember every second. Not because I was scared. I wasn't. But because it was so completely unexpected. Here we were, two old-timers who've spent decades in the woods. We've seen just about every animal the Pacific Northwest has to offer. But this wasn't any of them. It looked like a small, hairy person. But it wasn't human. It looked like a young Bigfoot. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was seeing something the forest never meant us to see. And the strangest part, it was innocent. Just a kid, playing alone in the ferns, like the woods were its backyard. We didn't move. We didn't breathe loud. We just watched. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it froze. Its head snapped toward the west, ears alert. It dropped the stick and crouched low into the brush, disappearing from view. It knew something was nearby. And whatever it wasn't us. We didn't move. Neither of us said a word for at least 30 seconds. We just crouched there, staring at the empty spot in the ferns where it had disappeared. Finally, my brother whispered, "That wasn't a bear." I nodded slowly. "You saw how it walked. And how it played," he added. "Bears don't do that. Not like that." It settled in right then. We weren't watching a bear cub or a wild child lost in the woods. What we had just seen, the arms, the posture, the way it moved, it all pointed to one thing. As strange as it sounded, we both knew exactly what we were thinking, but neither of us wanted to say it out loud. "Could that have been a young Sasquatch?" my brother asked quietly. I didn't answer right away. It was too unreal to say out loud, but in my gut I already knew the answer. Nothing else fit. We stayed crouched, listening hard. The forest was still holding its breath. Whatever had spooked the little one was still out there, and it was close. We didn't want to scare it. We didn't want to alert whatever else might be nearby. So we stayed still and waited, hoping for another look. That moment changed everything. We'd come for a simple morning walk. Instead, we may have just witnessed something people search for their whole lives and never find. The little Bigfoot had been flipping leaves and pawing at the earth, completely absorbed in its play. But then, without warning, it stopped. It froze mid-movement, ears twitching. Its head slowly lifted and it sniffed the air. The change was immediate. Gone was the playful energy. In its place was alertness, tense, focused. The baby stood upright, just like a human child would, and turned its head slowly in different directions, listening. Then it looked straight toward us. We didn't move. We barely breathed. Its gaze didn't seem panicked, but it was aware now. It tilted its head slightly as if trying to figure out what we were, and it didn't run. It just stood there, watching, maybe trying to decide whether we were a threat or not. Then, from deep in the forest, a sound rolled out that froze the blood in our veins. A growl. Low, long and guttural. Nothing like a bear. Nothing like a cat. It was deeper than anything I'd ever heard in the wild. It echoed between the trees, like it came from something massive. My brother's hand gripped my arm. I didn't take my eyes off the ferns. Then we heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, measured, coming from the left. It was walking on two legs, no question about it, and each step sounded like it weighed hundreds of pounds. You could feel it in your chest more than hear it. Thud, thud, thud. The little one let out a soft, high-pitched hoot. Nothing loud, just a sound of acknowledgement. And immediately crouched low in the ferns, pressing itself close to the ground. Its body language had shifted from alert to submissive. Something big was coming. We didn't know what to do. Move, stay still, call out. But instinct told us to stay quiet. This wasn't our moment to interfere. Whatever was happening now was between them. And if that growl belonged to what we thought it did, we didn't want to be noticed. We didn't see it right away. At first, it was just a shape, something darker than the bark of the trees. Off to our left, maybe 60 yards out, standing still in the thickest part of the forest. At first glance, it could have been a tree trunk, but then it shifted just slightly, enough to catch our eye. It wasn't a tree. The outline became clearer, broad shoulders, arms that hung longer than human ones, and a body as wide as a refrigerator, easily over 8 feet tall. The head was slightly domed, and the body was covered in dark, matted fur. Black or very dark brown, impossible to tell in the low light beneath the canopy. It didn't move forward. It didn't run. It just stood there, half hidden by the trees, watching. Not the kind of watching you'd expect from a curious animal. It was assessing, calculating. Another growl rolled out. Not a warning, not a threat, but a clear message. I see you. It was louder than the first, deeper. It vibrated in our chests like distant thunder. Not a roar, just a growl, low and controlled. It didn't need to yell. It knew exactly what it was, and it knew we did too. My stomach dropped. My body tensed, every instinct screaming at me to run. But my legs didn't move. My mind knew better. Whatever this was, it didn't need speed to catch us. It was already too close. My brother whispered, "It's watching the little one." And that was when it clicked. We weren't the focus. The adult was locked in on the young one, making sure it was safe, making sure we weren't a threat. The little one hadn't moved since it hooted, still crouched in the ferns, staying low, respectful, submissive. Whatever bond they had, it was strong, and it was clearly based on rules we didn't understand. The adult's presence changed the entire atmosphere of the forest. The silence deepened. The air felt heavier. Even the light through the trees seemed dimmer. We weren't just hikers anymore. We were intruders. I remember gripping the strap of my day pack so hard my fingers ached. My brother slowly reached down, not to run, not to grab a stick, but just to show his hands were empty. We both understood the message now, loud and clear. This wasn't our territory. We weren't welcome here. Still, it never charged, never stepped closer. It didn't need to. It had us frozen in place with nothing more than presence and a single growl. The primal part of me, the old instinct buried deep in every human, knew we were standing face to face with something ancient, something wild, and something that had chosen, for now, to let us walk away. But only if we did the smart thing. It happened fast. The little one gave one last glance in our direction, not scared, just alert. Then, without a sound, it turned and ran. Not clumsy like a child, smooth, fast, silent. It darted between the trees and disappeared into the undergrowth like it had never been there at all. And the big one? Gone just as quickly. One moment it was standing there, watching, massive, unmoving. The next, it simply stepped back into the shadows. No crashing branches, no running footsteps, just gone. Like a shadow slipping out of view. It was over in seconds. But we stood there frozen for what felt like minutes, listening, waiting, heart pounding in our ears. But the forest, dead silent before, was now eerily calm. Nothing moved. No wind, no birds, no sound. Just that heavy silence pressing down on us. Then slowly, the normal sounds began to return. A single chirp, a rustle of leaves, life creeping back into the woods. We knew what we had to do. Without a word, we turned and started walking. Fast, not running. Running felt wrong. It felt like the kind of thing that would make you pray. But we didn't waste time. Every step felt like it echoed. Every crack of a twig beneath our boots made us wince. We didn't speak until we reached the edge of the trailhead. Only then did we look back. Nothing, just trees, mist, and stillness. But we both knew. We hadn't imagined it. We hadn't panicked or made up stories. We had witnessed something real. Something few ever get to see. Something we'd never forget. We didn't talk about it for days. Not because we didn't believe it. We did. But we were shaken. Deeply. It wasn't fear alone. It was the weight of knowing what we'd seen. Eventually, curiosity pushed us to learn more. We read everything we could find about juvenile Bigfoot sightings. To our surprise, others had seen them too, described just like what we saw. Small, curious, playful, but never alone. That's what stayed with us. The baby wasn't out there playing on its own. It was being watched, protected, maybe even tested. That massive figure wasn't late to the scene. It had been there the whole time. Watching, waiting, maybe teaching, maybe guarding. Whatever it was, the bond between them felt real. And the eyes, especially the baby's eyes. There was intelligence there, deep, aware, present. This wasn't just an animal in the woods. It was something more. We left that forest with more questions than answers. But we're certain of one thing: Bigfoot is real, and they are far more than legend. I'll never walk through those woods the same way again. Something changed that day, not just in what I saw, but in what I now believe is possible. If you're ever out there and something feels off, trust your gut. Nature has its own rules, and sometimes you're not alone. Are these creatures raising families under our noses, quietly living, watching, teaching their young, just like we do? Maybe. All I know is, we saw something real, and I'm grateful we did. Few people ever get that close to the unknown and live to carry the story home.